Hello, BookTube. I want to offer a bit of self-defense before I launch into this video. Of late, on some of my Steve live streams, I have talked about ebooks and my ebook library versus my print book library. And I did it in response to videos that I've received from a number of people who told me roughly the same thing, which is that if they are interested in reading book X, if that's the next book they want to pick up and start reading, they have reached a point now in their reading, in their personal reading habits, where they download the ebook to their e-reader and read it that way, and they don't think about it. And they do that, we're not talking mainly new releases here, but they do that regardless of whether or not they actually have already a print copy of the book sitting on a shelf across the room. They don't go to that shelf. They don't grab that book down off the shelf, and they just prefer to read it on their Kindle or their iPad. They prefer to read it on a device that goes with them instead of a book that goes with them. I got emails to that effect. A number of them all happened, coincidence to hit me all at once. And that got me thinking about my own reading, which is very much followed along those lines. Where I get books in the mail from publishers and end up reading their e-copies on my Kindle. And the same thing with older books, with books that are either, older or out of print. I end up reading them on my Kindle. Just two. I mean, I've got read-alongs and events coming up all summer. Matthew of Maybury Book Club and I were reading 7 Days in May, the old political novel 7 Days in May, and I have a copy of it. I have a print copy of it, and it never even occurred to me to do my reread of the book. I'll be rereading it with a lot of attention because I know that I'm going to be talking about it. It never even occurred to me to do that with the printed book. Literally never occurred to me to do. It was a second thought long afterwards that I remembered, I think I glanced at it on the shelf and thought, oh, wait, I have a copy of that. If I'm not going to go to that copy and pull it off the shelf and read it for a dedicated read-along of that book, then I'm never going to do it. I haven't got rid of the book. I haven't thrown it away or donated it or anything like that. But if I didn't pull it off the shelf and read it under those circumstances, I'm never going to pull it off the shelf and read it. It's always going to be the ebook. And that's been true for a lot of other things as well. New releases, books sent to me by authors, older books, out-of-print books. And that's had me thinking along tectonic shift lines about my printed books. This Hyde Cottage is not drowning in books. They are under control, but they're on every wall. The bookcases line every wall of this dwelling. Every wall, from floor to ceiling, except for a few decorative bookcases that are shorter or thinner that go in those odd little corners that rooms always have. Other than that, it's wall-to-wall books, literally wall-to-wall books. And I've been thinking tectonically, just in massive new category shift ways about how often I actually use those books. It's easy to just overlook them because they've been part of the walls of where I live for so long, but they've been part of the walls where I live in the past in a very different way. They were active parts. I was using them. And I largely go to ebooks now, which has caused me to think a lot along of problem lines. And one of those, of course, is Barnes & Noble, where I worked for a long time and have an employee discount. That problem took care of itself. The Barnes & Noble, the only Barnes & Noble that I have any access to, is closing in June. There'll be no more retail bookstores in Boston in June, which means that problem is gone right away. Every once in a while, I would go into that Barnes & Noble where I have an employee discount and find some new release or some older title that a publisher hadn't sent me or wasn't going to send me. A lot of times publishers don't send me mass market paperbacks, for instance. Don't really feel like, it doesn't feel right to ask for them, so instead I just go to the bookstore and get them. Occasionally I would do that. I won't even have the opportunity to do that in just a month. And the other problem case is the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, a great used bookstore here in Boston, where I have been going for a long time, a very long time. I have a huge number of memories caught up in the Brattle. I have gone there when I was happy, incredibly happy. I've gone there and gotten to know members of the staff very well. Not just at the store, but as friends outside of the store. I've got to know people from there over the years, over long, long numbers of years. I've gone away and come back to the Brattle. I've also gone there many, many times when I was sad. When I would lose a dog, or more than one dog. And there's that numbing, just world-erasing grief. When that world-erasing grief starts to ease and you know that it's time for you to start getting back to the world, sometimes I would go to the Brattle shop, to the Brattle sale lot. The Brattle has a sale lot outside, thousands of books that are outside during the day. And sometimes I would go there, and when I was really, really wounded like that, I wouldn't say hi to the staff. I wouldn't go inside. I wouldn't say hi to anybody in the lot. It would just be me and the books. And that helped. It really did. It's been thick and thin. It's a long-standing, close relationship. And the Brattle doesn't sell ebooks, right? They sell printed books. So whatever is happening with this tectonic relationship of mine with books, it's going to affect the Brattle. But I wanted to offer that as a kind of a throat-clearing clarification/apology, because I went to the Brattle today and I got a pile of books. Now, I don't know what that means. For the first time in 2022, I actually don't know what that means. Ordinarily, when I get a pile of books at the Brattle, what it means is that I'm going to read those books. Obviously, that's the only thing that it means. But am I? Am I going to read these books? I can't remember the last time I sat down with a printed paper and glue book and just turned pages from the beginning to the end. I can't remember the last time I did that. It was a long time ago. So am I going to read these? I hope that I am. But I want to show them to you anyway. It's a large pile, and it would have been much larger. This pile would have been twice this size. But I recently rediscovered something I've known all along. I've just never bothered to take advantage of it, which is that the Brattle will mail books. I don't have to. If I get a stack of things that is intended for someone else, I can simply have the shop mail them from there. I don't have to lug them back home, then lug them to the post office when the next time I get a chance. That doesn't have to happen. So this is, believe it or not, a smaller pile than the one that I walked out with. I will probably read these. Won't I? I will probably read these. We shall see. I will be reporting on this transformation the whole time. I've talked to a lot of you by email and Voxer and whatnot. Quite a few people going through a similar thing, or went through it years ago, and this is old news to them. Where, once upon a time, I had books everywhere. Now I don't. I read more than ever. Oh, God. It's the usual ominous background noise of the laundry. So we're going to start with mass market paperbacks, little paperbacks. I got a ton of paperbacks today. I think I only got one hardcover. Yeah, I only got one hardcover. All the rest are paperbacks. But I got a bunch of hardcover, of mass market paperbacks, which are the little ones, the smaller paperbacks, which are a perfect piece of technology. But when you've dealt with an e-reader of any kind, they seem pretty inconvenient. They're pretty delicate. They weren't meant to last more than 20 years. So 50 years later, they're still around, but they won't take a beating. They'll just fall apart if you read them. And a lot of the times they will. Sometimes they won't. It's amazing that they're here at all. And it's impossible to make marginalia in a mass market paper. Almost impossible to do. And you have to be careful. And if the thing snaps closed, you have to find where you were. If it snaps closed before you could put a bookmark in it, you have to find where you last left off. And you have to be careful about it. Can't crease it or anything like that and get it wet. But I got a bunch of mass market paperbacks anyway, because there's a whole bunch of events that are coming up. There's June on the Range, for instance, which comes up in June, where Michael K. Vaughan has assembled a whole posse of hosts to read Westerns in the month of June. There's Horror Mayhem put on by the Bookish Bryants in May, where we're reading horror stories of all different types and whatnot. And there's also a rumored event coming, an event to end all events, maybe quite literally, coming in August. Is it possible that there's an event in which the whole point is to read garbage? You know I'm on board if there is. So some of that was dictating these purchases, which were all free. All of these books were credit. So although I couldn't help but notice, it's been a while since any of you called in credit. This costs money. Anyway, the first. So I got a bunch of these things. I want to just show them to you. The first one here. Let's see. What do we do first? This is Edward Thompson. This is the Gladiators, Book 2. This is all about Attilius the Gladiator, with the UK cover there. Fairly good artwork for the horses. No idea what that guy's got on his head, but if I remember correctly, the first book in this series was Attilius the Slave. I think he's from Britain. Yeah, he's from it's a guy from Britain who is drafted into the Roman Imperial show machinery, and they're bad. they're bad novels, but I seem to remember reading. I don't think I've ever read Attilius the Gladiator, but I think I did read Attilius the Slave and kind of liked it in a trashy kind of way. Then we have a beautiful thing here. I just had to grab it. This is Swords Against Darkness, Volume 4, edited by Andrew Offutt. Really, really nice cover art there. The cover art is really nice. It's a little strange. That skull is way too big to be a human's and doesn't look anything like a human skull. And what's with the horse's teeth there? Is this some sort of alien horse? I don't really know. But these are anthologies. Andrew Offutt was a heck of a nice guy, and everybody wanted to give him work. He could get an anthology pulled together in about 5 minutes if he tried, and he often did. He was these are delightful reading experiences. I think I read Swords Against Darkness Volume 1 eons ago when it first came out. Certainly don't remember it having cover art like this. This volume came out in 1979. I think I read the first volume in this and then just dropped off. This is a collection of fantasy short stories, which I'm not always keen on fantasy short stories, but I'm sure that I've never read anything that's in here. Then we have something much, much later. This is from Angry Robot Books. This is Triumph by Dan Abnett. And it's set in an alternate history in which Queen Elizabeth, well, let me see here. The year is 2010. Her Divine Majesty, Queen Elizabeth XXX, sits upon the throne. Great Britain's vast empire is run by alchemy and superstition. Now Sir Rupert Triumph, dashing swordsman, has uncovered a vile plot to dethrone Her Glorious Majesty. For the honor of the nation, 2 arms. Very, very familiar stuff. Dan Abnett is an incredibly prolific writer who, among many, many other things, has written a ton of Warhammer books, and also is responsible for some truly great Legion of Superheroes stories. Truly great. Him and Andy Lanning together wrote some first-rate Legion of Superheroes stories. Never even heard of this thing. I doubt that it took him more than an hour to write, but it's just possible that it's trash, which puts it on my radar. Speaking of being on my radar, I mentioned June on the Range is coming right up. This thing was a surprise to me. This is Max Brand, who's a prolific Western author that I don't think I've ever read. I've stalked him in bookstores. I've seen his books a million times, but I don't think I've ever read him, mainly because, I'll confess, but you're guilty too. I didn't ever like the cover artwork. I wasn't aware that any of his books ever had really good Western cover art. You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be. Quite a few vintage Western novels have great cover art. Tons and tons. The whole runs on Louis L'Amour that have really good. When you look at them, they're so familiar that we tend not to see them. But when you stop and look at the cover art, quite a few of them are really, really nice. And I didn't know that Max Brand ever had that kind of artwork, but I found one, Silvertip's Trap, that does. It doesn't have any of the Max Brand covers that I've seen have all been sort of cartoony, and this isn't one. So this is a perfect opportunity for me to read this author in June on the Range. What is this about? At 30, Bill Naylor has spent half his life behind bars. Free again, and while looking for a new job, he saves a man from drowning. The rescued man turns out to be Barry Christian, the outlaw king. Naylor, rewarded with the top job in Christian's gang, thinks his fortune's made. but Christian's deadly enemy is Arizona Jim Silver, the legendary Silvertip. Silvertip has vowed to bring Christian to justice. Naylor, who knows firsthand about Silvertip's courage and fairness, realizes that Silvertip, his friend, is the more formidable of the two giants. Then Christian plans the crime of his career, a daring robbery that will make the gang rich. For Naylor, it is the one choice of a lifetime, until Naylor learns that Christian's plot calls for Silvertip's death. So I don't know the precise overlap of June on the Range and any kind of garbage. Lord knows a lot of Westerns are garbage, but I don't know this author at all, so I'll give it a try, absolutely, in June. What else have we got here? Okay, we've got a mass market paperback that someone else has reinforced, so I don't need to. It's in crappy shape. It was free. It's not going to take up much space, and it is a placeholder. It is purely a placeholder, because this is the one Patrick O'Brian novel that I don't have in a hardcover with a dust jacket in the normal American edition. I have all the rest of them now, but there's one. Years ago, I had all of the hardcovers with dust jackets. I got them as they were coming out, read them, annotated them, and put extensive notes in the back. And somehow, for some inexplicable reason, I got rid of that set. That set is out there in the world somewhere, but I got rid of it. And slowly, I have been building back up the Patrick O'Brien's in just a shelf of hardcovers. And the one I don't have is Treason's Harbor, and I found it in a UK mass market paperback, so it's in crappy shape, but it'll do. I'll just if I get to this as I'm rereading them, if I get to Treason's Harbor before I find the hardcover, I have the ebook, but I also have this now. It'll just go on the shelf. I think the UK mass markets are kind of cute anyway. Okay, then once again, there may be a whiff of garbage in the air. There may be a trash event coming up. An event set to take BookTube by storm. And naturally, such an event, should it happen, would occasion all sorts of discussions about what actually constitutes trash. What is trash? And what books qualify? And surely one characteristic would be books in series, right? Books, especially books in long series, would tend to automatically think of them as trash. And I found a series. There were entries in this series at the Brattle recently, but I was waiting to find number one. I didn't want any later entries in the series. I wanted just number one, and I found it today. Perfect condition as the day it was made. This is by Barry Sadler, and this is Casca, the Eternal Mercenary, with a great. Is that a '70s cover? Is that when this came out? Yeah, 1979. A great cover there. The reason that you see there's Nero playing while Rome burns, you've got gladiators, and you've got a cross in the background there. And the reason for that is because this character is the Roman centurion who puts a spear through the side of Jesus Christ when he's hanging on the cross, and is cursed to be a soldier forever until the second coming. And he cannot die. He can be severely wounded. He recovers from everything. And the story starts in this book where he is badly wounded, I think in Vietnam, and the medics actually watch as his skull and skin they're growing so fast that they can watch the process. Casca has many, many adventures set in many, many time periods, and Barry Sadler was a fascinating figure. A lot of the authors of the books that I got today are fascinating figures. I'm pretty sure there are only two of the authors that I got today who actually ever killed anybody, and Barry Sadler was one of those. But no one's ever, as far as I know, no one's ever written a biography of this guy, and that's a terrible shame. And as far as I can tell, if I remember sort of hazily, he has a large amount of autobiographical writings that have never even been printed. They just exist in a box. The Barry Sadler archives, I have no idea where they would be. He led a fascinating life. You could write a great story about it. But I'm not sure that great applies to the Casca novels. I haven't read this since 1979. So when the time comes, if the time comes, where I am overdosing in garbage, it'll be on the list. Oh, but it won't be anywhere near the top of the list. The top of the list will be occupied by these next two items. The first one is someone we've seen before. This is Lynn Carter, who scarcely ever wrote anything that wasn't garbage in a long career. And this is Thongor, another Thongor novel. This is Thongor and the Wizard of Lemuria. Check out that cover. Isn't that amazing? The cover tells a story on its own. You don't know what the story is. And if I remember correctly, the story on the cover has nothing to do with the story in the book. But you look at that and think, that what is this, 60 cents? Yeah, that is worth my 60 cents. So Thongor and the Wizard of Lemuria take 15 minutes to read. And you might think that my next book is also a Thongor novel because there were quite a few of them. But no, no. Instead, my next book is a Jongoor novel. Jongoor and the Lost Land. Totally different guy. Thongor is akin to Conan. Jongoor is akin to Tarzan. His parents' plane goes down in a wild and woolly jungle, and he is raised as a ape man. It's just awful stuff. This is, I believe, the first Jongoor adventure. Jongoor and the Lost Land is I believe, the first one, and I don't think I've ever read this. I think I read volume 3 in the Jongoor series, and that was the only one. That was quite enough. This thing is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. It is, I mean, it's got the green pages. This is not going to last more than one reading. This will fall apart as I read it. I can feel already in the spine that this will fall apart as I read it. When it does fall apart, I will save the cover, of course, because I don't know what's going on there. I'm not sure I want to know what's going on there. That's Frank Frazetta, but what is happening on that cover? Is he holding them by the throat, or are they preparing to take him to Cabo St. Lucas for spring break? Let's put it that way. So 2 more entries for any kind of a hypothetical event in which garbage is on the menu. And then the last of the mass market paperbacks is a total change of pace. It's history. So I grabbed it because it was free, and I've never seen it before, and I've heard all sorts of great things about it, but I don't know that it's going to be readable. This is Hitler's Last Offensive by Peter Elstad in an old UK Corgi mass market paperback. And this is the Ardennes offense. This is the Battle of the Bulge, the so-called Battle of the Bulge. And if I remember correctly, this author led an incredibly fascinating life, even more fascinating than Barry Sadler's, and I think just about the same number of homicides. But in addition to that, if I remember correctly, he was one of the few British soldiers who took part in the Battle of the Bulge, which was mostly the Germans against the Americans. This is a fairly big thing. I'm not sure how durable this is. I'm not sure how well I'll be able to get through it. I absolutely love reading about the Battle of the Bulge. This is, I think, probably one of the only major histories. This did really well for the author, and critics went crazy about it. He wrote a lot. This author wrote a lot, and a lot of different kinds of things. I think this came out late in his life, 1970, 1971, and people raved about it. So and I've seen it in many a bibliography, but I've never read it. So I don't think I've ever seen it. I think this is the first time that I've seen it, and it happened to be in a UK mass market paperback. So I will read it. I will reinforce it. I will be as delicate as possible, and we'll just see. We'll see if it can survive, which is not a thing I have to worry about with an ebook. I get the file. The file, it's either pure or it's corrupted. If it's corrupted, I delete it and get a new version. If I don't, then it's going to go from machine to machine. It's going to always be in perfect condition. It's never going to change at all. All right, so those are the mass market paperbacks. Then we'll move on to the trade paperbacks. And the first few of those are squat little brick things, which is always appealing to me, just aesthetically. This is another book that I have seen in many a bibliography without ever actually holding a copy in my hand. So it's fascinating. I love the wars of the 20th century. I think are incredibly interesting, incredibly fascinating, and I love all the little details of them. And I've got a few things to read now that I've never read before. This is by L.A. Carillon, and it's his big book on Gallipoli. It's a big fat thing on Gallipoli. This is Penguin Bantam. It's a Bantam Books, but this is not an American edition. And somebody has been through it. The spine is very gently creased about 1/3 of the way in. So I don't think whoever read this the first time, I don't think they finished it. I'm going to be very gentle with this, but I'm going to give it a try. Imagine a feast like this. I mean, this won't be just about, there's no way you could write a book this size just about Gallipoli. Instead, the focus will be on Gallipoli. And I can't explain, except to you, my fellow history buffs, the sheer joy of having big books on subjects that I have read a lot about that are effectively new to me. That is just wonderful. So I grabbed this, of course. Then this next one, again, as is true so many times throughout this pile, the author's life is utterly fascinating, almost as fascinating as the subject of the book. And this is, again, a big, fat work of history that I have seen in a million bibliographies, but never read. This is Hugh Thomas. I don't think I've read much Hugh Thomas. I know that he's written a lot, and all of it is praised. I don't think I've read much of it. This is Armed Truce, another UK trade paperback, his big book about the beginnings of the Cold War. So you've got an alliance, the Allies, in the final days of World War II. Every single person in the Allies knows that they are not ideologically aligned. They know that it's an alliance of enemies. There are enemies in the fold. What happens when the great cause that brought them all together is accomplished? You're not going to suddenly become friends with rabidly altered ideologies, people that want everything you have. This is those early days. I think this book covers 1945 and 1946, and in great detail. But with everything I've heard about this author and the few things I've read, a huge amount of eloquence. So that's 3 big history volumes that I haven't read on subjects that deeply, deeply interest me. So that is fantastic. That is just fantastic. And then we have the last of these big, blockish, smaller, squatter trade paperbacks is historical, but it's not history. And it has a special place in my heart because I was originally sent a copy of this by one of you years ago. I don't even remember who the sender was. Years and years ago, someone watched my channel and said, I've never heard you mention this book. I've got a lot of recommendations from you. I'd like to recommend something to you, and I'd like to send it to you. It's terrific fun. And they sent it to me, and I read it, and it was terrific fun. And I think I got rid of it to the next person who was looking for terrific fun and regretted it. I regretted it. Usually I get rid of books that you know already if you watch this channel. They come and they go. Even my worst enemies cannot accuse me of being stingy. I am a generous person. So it went away, but I regretted it. Usually I don't even think about it, but I didn't regret giving it to the person who received it, but I regretted that I didn't have a copy because not only did someone go to the bother of sending me a book before I established rule number 1, but also I enjoyed it. And I thought, well, the Brattle will provide, but it's a toughie. It wasn't a big release thing. And lo and behold, I found a copy. This is by David Bishop, and it is Fiends of the Eastern Front. And there you have a famous picture of a soldier from the Battle of the Bulge. This takes place at the end of World War II, and I want to read you the description because this was really good. World War II. The armies of Germany are rampaging across Europe, and the Allies are struggling to hold them back. Amidst the fighting on the Russian front, 2 young German soldiers become aware that darker things than the enemy are stalking the battlefield. But what do the mysterious Lord Constanta and his Romanian platoon have to do with blood-drained Russian soldiers? I wonder what they could possibly have to do with blood-drained Russian soldiers. And why are they never seen during daylight hours? The Volmer brothers soon find that their lives and souls are in danger when they begin to uncover the truth. Vampires on the Eastern Front. I read that when the person sent me the copy that they sent me. This has a little divot. Theirs was in perfect condition. I read that description and thought, that is music to my ears. Vampires on the Eastern Front. That is music to my ears. But will the book live up to the music? That is such a perfect elevator pitch. Such a perfect, dumb elevator pitch. Will the book live up to it? And the book did. The book absolutely did. This is a classic of vampire fiction. And now I have a copy. I'm never getting rid of it, no matter how many puppy dog eyes you people make to me. I will find you another copy, but I'm keeping this one. And this next one, I think I have praised this before on this channel. This was the author's debut, and what a debut. What a debut. This is by Paul Malmont, and it is the Chinatown Death Cloud Peril. And this is a novel that intentionally mimics the fervid, over-the-top histrionics of pulp literature. And it doesn't just mimic that literature, it also includes the stars of that literature. The creator of The Shadow, the creator of Doc Savage, are in here as characters, and they are amazingly researched. Amazingly. It doesn't hit you over the head at all. This book definitely wants to entertain you. It does not want to impress you with how much research the author has done, but oh my God, the author has done a huge amount of research, and it shows. It's amazing. But the best character in here, the worst character in here, the standout character in here, the one who steals the book, is L. Ron Hubbard. So, this is just so good. And I got an advance. This came out after I was back in reviewing, didn't it? I'm pretty sure I got this 2006, right as I was getting back into reviewing. I got a copy of this from the publisher and got rid of it. Somewhere along the way, I got rid of it. That's almost 20 years ago, so these things happen. I'm very happy to find it again. I wish that I could find... I know that this author wrote a sequel. At least one sequel. I haven't really kept up with him. I think he wrote at least one sequel to this book that was called Astounding, and that featured Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov and a whole bunch of other science fiction characters in much the way that the pulp characters are featured in this book. I'd love to find that book. But I was happy to find this one. This is so energetically, entertainingly written. So that's a trade paperback. Bean, what are you doing? What are you doing? You haven't stopped licking in half an hour. Oh. What's the matter? Look at that face of yours. That's such a pretty face. We're almost done. Don't you worry. This next one was like a mirage. This next one was like a mirage. Because my first thought was, oh, I know what that is, and I know what that is, and I was wrong. It's a fake out in two different directions. I saw a book and said, oh, a Mike Mignola cover, but it's not a Mike Mignola cover. I saw a book and thought, oh, Farford and Grey Mouser, but it's not Farford and Grey Mouser. Instead, it's this thing, Swords Against the Shadowland by Robin Wayne Bailey. The Further Adventures of Farford and Grey Mouser, with a cover by Mike Chaney. Not Mike Mignola. It's in the Mike Mignola style. And the book is from, who is this? Borealis, who did the four volumes of actual Farford and Grey Mouser by Fritz Leiber that looked just like this. Only they had the same design, only the illustration was by Mike Mignola, and the stories were by the guy who created Farford and Grey Mouser. This is Farford and Grey Mouser pastiche fiction. And I didn't know that this existed. I had no idea that this existed. So, in a morbid curiosity, would you have been able to leave it behind if you love the new One stories as much as I do? I had to grab this. I don't know what it will be like. I'm sure that there'll be an author's note in here or something, or forward of some kind, trying to sell me on Dr. Watson's battered tin dispatched box. I'm sure that there'll be a note in here saying that this was carefully, lovingly reconstructed from notes by Robin Wayne Bailey, or maybe she collaborated on it with the ailing author, and she held his hand while he held the pen or whatnot. I'm sure that kind of falderall will be in here. I'm not necessarily going to believe that. This is just pastiche fiction, and that can be good. Lord knows I've read a million Conan pastiche novels when I'm a dyed-in-wool fan of the originals by Robert E. Howard. So, we'll give it a try. If it's good, well, then I will have taken in essentially another Farford and Grey Mouser story, which is always wonderful. And if it's bad, well, there is that aforementioned possible garbage event. And then the last book, we go right back to the arena. We go right back to the Gladiator shows. This is by the prolific historical novelist Ben Kane. I've read some of his books. I don't know anybody who's read them all, but I've read some of his books and kind of sort of like them. I wanted to give this one another try. I read this when it first came out. I'm pretty sure I got this from the publisher. I hope that I didn't show it on this channel. 2012, so no, before we were talking to each other. This is Spartacus the Gladiator. He did at least a couple of books on Spartacus. This is Spartacus, being captured in Thrace and impressed into the Roman military game machinery, learning the deadly skills that would make him so formidable opponent of Rome. And I think then, this is not the story of the Spartacus revolt. I'm pretty sure this book is not. I think the next one is. I think Ben Kane did at least 2 Spartacus novels that I know of. But I'm willing to try this one. I don't think I read this. I'll have to check and see. God forbid, it would be very embarrassing if I not only read it but reviewed it. I've written so many reviews of Spartacus stuff over the years. I think I've written a Ben Kane review or two. But obviously, as you can tell from all this thinking, I guess, and maybe it's time for a reread. And it was free, so I brought it back here. And there you go. That was a Brattle book haul, which I don't want to say is a thing of the past, obviously, since I had a blast while I was there. I had a great visit, as I always do. And it was fun to look at all of the books. Even in the freezing cold, it was fun to look at them all and think about them, remember them. It was also fun to hunt for books for other people. That's also lots of fun. I don't know. What's going to happen to these Brattle trips? Am I going to make fewer of them? Am I going to get these books as kind of a lend-lease and get rid of them as fast as I get them? How many of these things are destined for bookshelves? I don't know. I honestly don't know. That's one of the reasons that my library tour has sort of fallen away, is that my book collection and the very philosophy behind it is suddenly in flux. But I'll take you along for the ride, and in the meantime, the Brattle trips won't stop until I figure it out. So we have Spartacus the Gladiator, which would be, again, like the Attilius book. There'll be a lot of stuff in here about the author's research into what it was like to be a Roman gladiator. We have Swords Against the Shadowland, which is not Fritz Leiber, not illustrated by not Mike Mignola. We have the Chinatown Death Cloud Peril, starring, among other people, a furtive and wonderfully hateable L. Ron Hubbard. We have Fiends of the Eastern Front. Very happy to find a copy of this again. Vampires on the Eastern Front. Let's see here. We have Gallipoli. Big, fat new study of the disaster of Gallipoli. Fantastic. We have Armed Truce, the very beginnings of the Cold War that some of us, not we all, some of us lived in and grew up in. What else have we got here? Hitler's Last Offensive, by a fascinating author who, again, I don't think has ever had a biography. I'm not even sure that his biographical writings are printed. Then we have Jongoor of the Lost Land, and Thongor and the Wizard of Lemuria, which makes me automatically want to, in addition to reading trash books in August, makes me want to write a trash book in August about Schlongor. That I'm really tempted to do, or either Schlongor or La La Longer or something like that, since that seems just so shamelessly trashy that it's Thongor and Jongoor. That is just awesome. You can't come up with another kind of name. We have Casca the Eternal Mercenary by Barry Sadler. #1. So this is when we get introduced to him. We get his origin story. Treason's Harbor by Patrick O'Brien, in a UK mass market paperback that is just a stopgap. I don't fancy myself actually reading this thing, but if it comes to it, and I want to read it, and I don't want to read it as an ebook, and I don't have the hardcover yet, well, now I have a copy. We have Silvertip's Trap by Max Brand for June on the Range. That goes right on the pile for June on the Range. We have Triumph by Dan Abnett. Haven't read even a fraction of this guy's stuff. I don't think I've ever read any Warhammer books by him. Maybe one or two, but they're not sticking out. Swords Against Darkness, #4, an anthology edited by Andrew Offutt with a killer art cover there. And finally, like I mentioned, The Gladiators, Volume 2, Attilius the Gladiator by Edward Thompson. I don't know how long this series went on. I know the first book is the one I think I read, but I don't know how many more Attilius books there are. But that was my trip to the Brattle. I won't be going back to the Brattle this week, but maybe next week. We shall see. We shall see. I am going to see, just in the natural course of things, am I going to read any of these books? Am I so intrigued by that Gallipoli book, or Hitler's Last Offensive, that I actually start to read it, even though it is in a format and in a way of reading that I don't largely do anymore. Even though they're all over this place, I don't largely do that kind of reading anymore. Will I do that? I'm curious to see what the weekend will bring. But anyway, this video has gone on long enough. I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.